We all know ancient Rome for its 1,000-year history of epic military conquests, gladiator battles, and achievements in engineering, architecture, and law. But in the end, the mighty Roman civilization collapsed like a house of cards. So what happened? This is the story of the rise and fall of the Roman Empire. Let's rewind a bit, back to 753 BC. When the city of Rome was just a twinkle in the eyes of Romulus and Remus, who were twin brothers and allegedly the sons of Mars, the Roman god of war. As babies, Romulus and Remus were abandoned on the banks of the Tiber River by order of their uncle, King Amulius, who saw them as a threat to his rule. Legend has it that the baby boys were suckled by a she-wolf until they were rescued by a herdsman. Romulus and Remus grew to adulthood, defeated their uncle, and founded a city at the site where they had been saved. Soon after, the brothers argued over where to build the city, and Romulus killed Remus as he attempted to climb a wall that Romulus had constructed to keep him out. Origin myth aside, early Romans were a mix of different ethnic groups, including the Etruscan, Apennine, and Greek civilizations. Over time, Rome would grow from a small village, said to be built on 7 hills, to a thriving metropolis. Rome's era as a monarchy ended in 509 BC with the overthrow of its 7th king, Lucius Tarquinius Superbus, whom ancient historians described as cruel and tyrannical relative to his benevolent predecessors. It was said that a popular uprising arose over the rape of a virtuous noblewoman, Lucretia, by the king's son. Talk about a royal scandal. Whatever the cause, Rome transformed from a monarchy into a republic. Rome's complex political institutions began to crumble under the weight of the growing empire, ushering in an era of internal turmoil and violence. The gap between rich and poor widened as wealthy landowners drove small farmers from public land, while government access was increasingly limited to the more privileged classes. Attempts to address these social problems, such as the reform movements of Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus in 133 BC and 123 BC, respectively ended in the reformers' deaths at the hands of their opponents. Gaius Marius, a commoner whose military prowess elevated him to the position of consul in 107 BC, was the first of a series of warlords who would dominate Rome during the late Republic. By 91 BC, Marius fended off attacks by his opponents, including his fellow general Sulla, who emerged as military dictator around 82 BC. After Sulla retired, one of his former supporters, Pompey, briefly served as consul before waging successful military campaigns against pirates in the Mediterranean and the forces of Mithridates in Asia. During this same period, Marcus Tullius Cicero, elected consul in 63 BC, famously defeated the conspiracy of the patrician Catiline and won a reputation as one of Rome's greatest orators. When the victorious Pompey returned to Rome, he formed an uneasy alliance known as the First Triumvirate with the wealthy Marcus Licinius Crassus, who suppressed a slave rebellion led by Spartacus in 71 BC, and another rising star in Roman politics, Gaius Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar returned to Rome to vie for the consulship in 59 BC after earning military glory in Spain. From his alliance with Pompey and Crassus, Caesar received the governorship of 3 wealthy provinces in Gaul beginning in 58 BC. He then set about conquering the rest of the region for Rome. The First Triumvirate came to an end with the death of Pompey's wife, Julia, who also happened to be Caesar's daughter, and the death of Crassus in battle against Parthia the following year. With old-style Roman politics in turmoil, Pompey stepped in as sole consul in 53 BC. With his military glory in Gaul and increasing wealth, Julius Caesar's prominence began to eclipse Pompey. Pompey soon joined forces with his Senate allies in an effort to undermine Caesar. Hearing of these machinations, Caesar and one of his legions plotted his return. In 49 BC, Caesar crossed the Rubicon, a river on the border between Italy and Cisalpine Gaul. Caesar's return ignited a civil war from which he emerged as dictator of Rome for life in 45 BC. As the sole Roman ruler, Caesar launched ambitious programs of reform within the empire. The most enduring of these was his establishment of the Julian calendar, which, except for slight modifications in the 16th century, remains in use today. He also planned new imperial expansions in Central Europe and to the east. Amid these vast designs, Caesar was assassinated on March 15, 44 BC, by a group of conspirators who believed that Caesar had become too powerful. 60 conspirators, led by Marcus Junius Brutus and Gaius Cassius Longinus, stabbed Caesar to death in the Roman Senate building. The date March 15th has since become infamous as the Ides of March. The conspirators believed that Caesar's death would lead to the restoration of the Republic. Instead, the assassination plunged Rome into a fresh round of civil wars, out of which Octavian, Caesar's grandnephew, would emerge triumphant as Augustus, the first Roman emperor. By 29 BC, Augustus had become the sole leader of Rome and all its provinces. To avoid meeting his uncle's fate, Augustus made his position as absolute ruler palatable to the public by seemingly restoring the political institutions of the Republic, though in reality, he retained the real power for himself. Still, Augustus's reinstating of political institutions restored morale in Rome after a century of discord and corruption and ushered in an unprecedented age of peace and economic prosperity called the Pax Romana. During his successful reign of 56 years, Augustus instituted various social reforms, won numerous military victories, and allowed Roman literature, art, architecture, and religion to flourish. His popularity continued even after his death. The Roman Senate deified Augustus and built temples in his honor, beginning a long-running tradition of apotheosis for popular emperors. Many emperors followed Augustus, some good, some bad. Caligula was the third emperor of Rome, bloodthirsty and unhinged. Nero, the final emperor of the Julio-Claudian dynasty and cruel in his own right, likewise remains a reviled figure in Roman history, though the legend that he fiddled as Rome burned was just propaganda put forth by his enemies. But Nero did try to remove himself from suspicion of arson and accused Christians of starting the fire, brutally executing many of them. Following these two ignominious characters, the Flavian dynasty saw the construction of the Colosseum, the restoration of the Senate, and increased consideration for public welfare. Emperor Trajan, who ruled from 98 to 117 BC, oversaw the greatest expansion of Rome's borders in its history, with victories over the kingdoms of Dacia and Parthia. Key to this expansion was Roman military might. The Roman army was highly trained and disciplined, growing in reputation as the best army in the world. Through the repeated successes its military campaigns, the empire was able to expand its control over 3 separate continents, including Asia, Africa, and most of Europe. In the end, the empire became so big, it was divided into 2 separate areas, the Eastern and Western Roman empires. Within these borders, newly made Roman citizens were forced to pay taxes to their governors, with the goal of filling the empire's coffers and ensuring its stability. So where did it all go wrong for the Roman Empire? We can't pinpoint a single cause that led to the empire's collapse, but historians offer several reasons and events instrumental to its final downfall. Pillaging and slavery were key to keeping the empire afloat financially, with Rome's economy heavily reliant on slave labor. With new laws banning slavery, an increase in unemployment and government distributions arose. The slow rise of the new religion Christianity also threatened Roman society. Additionally, corruption, political disputes, and power struggles rocked a government already weakened by frequent turnover that resulted in haphazard leadership and continuous conflict between the emperor and the Senate. Perhaps each of these issues on its own could have been resolved, but their simultaneous occurrence brought about the empire's decline. The decadence and megalomania of one ruler, Commodus, brought the age of the Roman emperors to a disappointing end. The Greek historian Cassius Dio said that the accession of Commodus in 180 AD marked the descent from a kingdom of gold to one of rust and iron. Commodus's death at the hands of his ministers sparked yet another period of civil war. During the 3rd century, Rome suffered from a cycle of near-constant conflict. A total of 22 emperors took the throne, many of them meeting violent ends at the hands of the same soldiers who had propelled them to power. Meanwhile, external threats, including continuing aggression from Germanic tribes and Parthians and raids by the Goths over the Aegean Sea, plagued the empire and depleted its coffers. The reign of Diocletian temporarily restored peace and prosperity in Rome, but at a high cost to the unity of the empire. Diocletian divided power into the so-called Tetrarchy, sharing his title of Augustus with Maximian. A pair of generals, Galerius and Constantius, were appointed as the assistants and chosen successors of Diocletian and Maximian. Diocletian and Galerius ruled the Eastern Roman Empire, while Maximian and Constantius took power in the West. The stability of this system suffered greatly after Diocletian and Maximian retired from office. Constantine, the son of Constantius, emerged from the ensuing power struggles as sole emperor of a reunified Rome in 324 AD. He moved the Roman capital to the Greek city of Byzantium, which he renamed Constantinople, and at the Council of Nicaea established Christianity as the official religion of Rome. Unity under Constantine proved temporary, however, and 30 years after his death, the Roman Empire again split into East and West. Eventually, ancient Rome collapsed under the weight of its bloated empire, losing its provinces one by one, Britain around 410 AD, and Spain and northern Africa by 430 AD. Attila and his brutal Huns invaded Gaul and Italy around 450 AD. And though the Romans were successful in fending off these invaders, the empire had already assimilated so many Germanic peoples not loyal to the Roman Empire that the empire began to disintegrate. In September 476 AD, a Germanic prince named Odoacer won control of the Roman army in Italy. After deposing the last Western emperor, Romulus Augustus, Odoacer's troops proclaimed him King of Italy, bringing an ignoble end to the long and glorious history of ancient Rome.